There are guys and girls in this room, and you have underestimated yourself. And you're better than who you've become. And there's so much more for you to be. And so this week, for just a few times together, you're going to have an absolute blast. If you've never been to the Redneck Riviera, you're going to see things on the beach you will never forget, okay? I promise you. You're going to be like, what was that? But listen, if you walk away from this week and you miss the biggest thing in the world, and that is you being able to connect your life and to start to connect some dots to the person that God created you to be. Because there is not one single young lady nor one single young man in this room who does not have greatness existing in them. You are not a human being trying to figure out how to become spiritual. You are a spiritual being trying to figure out how to become the greatest human you can be. And we have to answer this question, and you are old enough, regardless of whether you're in middle school, if you're in high school, juniors and seniors, you're staring the next season of your life in the face. We've got to answer this question because some of you came here this week and you're not really sure you buy it. Let's be straight up with each other. I watched you walk in, and some of you, you're not sure you buy all this. Because we are creatures who gravitate to the crowd, and some of you, while the rest of everybody else was jumping up and down, you did it for a little while, and then you looked around and went, what in the heck are we doing? Because you sure don't roll like that when you're back in Memphis. And you wouldn't wear the clothes and the matching stuff that you have on with your bandanas on you and your crocagator on your shirt, okay? You wouldn't do that back home. But here, all of a sudden, we're like, are we... And let's be straight up. Some of you in this room, you're not even sure you buy this whole God thing. I mean, if we get really, really honest, aren't we all just assuming that there's a God? You came so far, and you've meshed yourself among all these other people. Aren't we all just assuming that there's a God? See, this is what I'm convinced of. Not because I'm standing in front of you speaking, not because I've done that for a while, but because I'm the father of a 23-year-old son, the father of a 21-year-old daughter, and the father of an 18-year-old daughter. And this is what I know about the world that you live in. Everything in your life, right, girls, pushes against your self-image and tries to convince you that you're not enough. See, guys, what you don't understand is that there are young ladies sitting here tonight, and they're not even sure they love themselves, much less love the creator of the universe. And there are guys here, girls, let me just give you a heads up about the guys. They walk around like they're all that in a bucket of grease. Some of them this week, they're going to wear a tank top so small, you're like, hey, your little brother wants his shirt back, you know? He's going to do push-ups before he gets out on the beach and just walk up to you and go, bam, you know that thing? You're already doing it. My man right here. Dude's so skinny he could hang glide on a cheese nip, right? But watch girls. I know, a Dorito. But listen, but here's the reality. With all the bravado that guys give out, here's what we're so unsure of what this thing that we call life is really all about. And here's how I know it's true. Because so many of us in this room, you're so convinced that you're supposed to give some crazy, unrealistic image to the rest of the world. This is who you think you're supposed to be. And if we just take a step back, adults, we have to hear this. If we just take a step back as adults, we hand you a world that is in absolute chaos. It doesn't even have to be personal for you to look around and go, what in the heck is going on? But let's make it personal. To the guy who's here this week and this time last year, mom and dad were together. This time this year, one or the other said, I don't love you anymore. The young lady here who's brokenhearted because she has a father that's never looked her in the eye and said, I love you and I believe in you. The young man, girls, the young man in the room, and that's never happened in your life. Because what you hope and pray is that your dad is proud of you, and you're just not sure. And so what do? We run to all these goofy things that don't give us hope or an answer. And this is what I'm most afraid of, is that some of you have learned the art of being really, really good at playing church, but at the very core of who you are, you're just not sure there's a God. You're just not sure this whole thing is true. And so let me tell you what we're going to do tonight and 3 other times that we're together. There was a letter written by the dude who wrote half of the New Testament. It's a letter to a church in Ephesus, modern-day Turkey. The reason that letter was written is because, and we're going to talk about this specifically tomorrow night, the reason that letter was written was because a man named Jesus lived, a man named Jesus was crucified, killed, murdered, assassinated, and 3 days later, he rose from the dead. You may not be impressed by that. You may not be impressed by the fact that Jesus rose from the dead. If you're not impressed by the resurrection, try it. Die and try to come back to life. We'll wait. To which we all go, no, I don't want to try that. Well, what happened? Everything changes because Jesus rises from the dead. And to make a long story short, these people started going everywhere, telling everybody one central message. Jesus has risen from the dead, and this one specific person had an incredible relationship change. He hated people of the way, people who were following Jesus, but Jesus met him in such an incredible, fantastic way, changes his life, and he starts writing letters to these churches. Now, before he had written a letter to this church in Ephesus, he had actually been there. He went to Ephesus, a place called the Light of Asia. It was a time in the world's history where everything seemed to flow through Ephesus. In fact, you could walk down the streets of Ephesus, and much like your world today as a teenager, on either side of the street, they had these giant pillars, and in between those pillars, they had statues of all the gods that they believed in. And here's what I think. You may not have that literally in your life, but you have it figuratively. Because this is going to be the pushback for you, right, girls? For one of those gods in your life is a him. And he's so fine he blows your mind. Hey, Mickey, he's that guy, okay? And every time you think of him, you're just like, you start crying, right? Oh my God, Jesus, thank you for creation. Thank you, thank you, thank you. You know, that it just happens. And for some of you, I hope you don't act like that, but for some of you, for some of others of us, it's your athletic ability. It's your mad skills in class. It's the fact that fellas, you are that dude. You're just good looking and everybody knows it, and you're big man on campus. Or perhaps it's what you want to be when you get out of high school. Or perhaps it's your reputation. You have all these gods. This guy Paul goes to Ephesus, and if you're thinking it was this rinky-dink town, I brought you a picture. This is a picture of the theater in Ephesus. Can you throw that picture up on the screen? This is a picture of the theater in Ephesus. When Paul goes to Ephesus, he literally started a riot because he wanted to go and stand in front of a theater full of people who worshiped all of these pagan gods. In fact, the goddess Diana or Artemis was the preeminent god in Ephesus. And the people there were so afraid that they would turn their attention to this Jesus that Paul was talking about, that they made him leave because they didn't want to believe in this one true God. And so part of the first thing that Paul says to the church in Ephesus when he writes them this letter, he said, I also pray that you'll understand the incredible greatness of God's power for us who believe him. Now, this is what blows my mind that he writes them this. He had gotten run out of town because they didn't want him to talk about Jesus. Because to talk about Jesus, to actually trust in this power, to actually trust in this one that's risen from the dead, means that all these other gods have to become incredibly puny or eliminated from your life. And instead of you just operating by some assumption, you got to get really, really serious. And so here's what I want to say on the back end of what Paul writes the church in Ephesus from the get-go, that I pray that you will know and understand this incredible greatness of God's power. If you sit in this room tonight from the get-go unapologetically, and yes, I am passionate about this because I am sick and tired of people your age going to college and getting destroyed. Absolutely obliterated. There are some of you in this room, you are a practical agnostic or a practical atheist. And the reason why, you don't really believe that there's no God. You just don't believe in the bullcrap version of the God that's been presented to you. But if you're going to be that teenager in the room, sorry, I said crap. If you're going to be that teenager in this room, kind of not, sorry. All right. If you're going to be that teenager in this room, you've got to explain yourself. If you're not going to believe in this Jesus or in the one true God, I think this is what Paul wanted to say to the church in Ephesus. If you're not going to believe in the one true God, then explain yourself. Explain the fact, sitting here, guys and girls alike, who are not really sure. Explain the fact that you can go about 200 or 300 yards that way, and you will run into the Gulf of Mexico, one of many bodies of water, a part of the world that you live in. The person that you put your hands on just a few minutes ago and gave them a hug and told them that you love them and told you that you believed in them, that person is about 60% water. They have roughly 10 gallons of water in them. Some of us have more, some of us have less. Don't laugh. Brother got some water. All right, so I got some water in my trunk, I know. I just want to stay hydrated. I'm like a camel. You never know when you may be out in the desert and you need to. All right, so you are 60% water. About 10 gallons of you is water. Do you realize that water is made up of these things called atoms? And in one drop of water, there are so many atoms in one drop of water that if you were to try to count the number of atoms in one drop of water, it would take every single person on counting one atom per second for the next 20,000 years. Because it's that minuscule, that small. One atom per second for the next 20,000 years. And you're convinced there is no God? You are this being, this cellular being made up of these atoms and electrons and neutrons and protons, and you're like, we just got out of school, shut up. Scientists are able to reduce these things that you're made up of to over 150 subatomic particles to literally 10 to the minus 26 power. But you know what's amazing? They can't discover when they get it divided to that small of an entity where that small of an entity started or came from. And if they can't explain where it came from, if they can't get to anything that's concrete reality, the only explanation is that you and I came from something that isn't concrete, something that is spiritual. And again, I want to just slide it across the table to you. Since you're so arrogant and cocky about your, I just don't believe, at least be able to explain yourself. At least be able to explain yourself. At least be able to explain, I don't know if you realize this, but scientists have discovered a planet rocketing through our universe, going 67,000 miles an hour. And while it's going 67,000 miles an hour through our universe, it is spinning 1,000 miles an hour at the same time. That planet rocketing through our universe is called Earth, your home. This girl over here just went, oh. And does anybody else not find it fascinating and astounding that while we literally are sitting in this room right now, we are going 67,000 miles an hour, spinning 1,000 miles an hour, and nobody in this room is losing their balance or your hair's blowing. And you've never thought about it. And while it's going 67,000, now you're like, dude, did you know that? That's fast. I'm sorry, guys, small group leaders, because your small group tonight is going to be awful. There's guys going, dude, my mind is blown. Can we just take a nap? And here's what's crazy. Shh, let me finish. Here's what's crazy. As you're doing that, 67,000 miles an hour, spinning 1,000 miles an hour, the Earth stays this perfect 93 million miles away from the sun. If that ever changes, if it's 92 million, if it's 93 million, or 94 million, we either burn up or die, or freeze to death. And it only changes by 1/10 of one. The variance is so small. And you can't tell me how that happens. But you're convinced there's no God? While it's spinning, it stays tilted 23.5%. 23.5 degrees. Like this, not percent, sorry. It stays tilted. 40% because of the gravitational pull of the sun, 60% because of the gravitational pull of this planet that scientists said was flying through our universe, flying through our galaxy, and got stuck. The moon, flying through our galaxy, and it got stuck and just started circling our planet. It's kind of like, okay, and just going in a circle. I'll just do this for a while. And do you realize, and some of you, you're going to have a romantic moment this week with your boys. Let's go watch the moon. Girls, y'all will probably be singing. Boys be like, how far? It's just... And do you realize that if that moon doesn't exist, you don't? Because, I'll tell you why. Because if there's no gravity from the moon, one side of our planet stays facing the sun and we burn up. If there's no gravity from the sun, we stay facing the moon and we freeze. And you've never thought about that. And that kind of intelligibility screams something intelligent is behind it. Or consider this tragic picture. It's coming. Not that one. That's not tragic. That one. Several years ago, Boston Marathon, people running. And everybody that saw that happen live or watched the replays of that tragedy, there's not one single person in this room that looks at that and doesn't go, what? But let me make it more personal. Next picture. Or you see what happens in Parkland. Or next picture. Or next picture. Or you see what happens, and I'm not going to throw these pictures up because I care too much. You see what happens in your own city with young men and young women gunned down in the street. And not one single person in this room looks at that and goes, that's okay. Because we all know that's wrong. And what I want to ask you, teenager, is what is it in you that convinced you that's wrong? And here's what I know. There are people in our world who don't even believe what we say we believe, that look at that kind of stuff and go, that's wrong. And if you have that kind of moral reasoning existing in you, that means that this universe, your existence, exists in a moral framework that you can't explain. But again, if there is no God, explain yourself. And all of us in this room, I have this sneaky suspicion that most of us in this room, I should rephrase, most of us in this room have had this encounter that is so supernatural, that is so out of the ordinary, that something happened and you cannot even talk about it without you getting goosebumps. You can't even retell the story without you being, what was that? And some of those things are tragic, and other of those things are just so supernatural that you can't explain it. I get an Instagram direct message this week from a young lady, a college student in Auburn, Alabama. She attends Auburn University. Months ago, I'm speaking there on a Sunday morning in her church. Little did I know that this young lady had just found out that she was pregnant. She wasn't married. Her name is Caitlin. I share you her name because I asked, Caitlin, can I tell your story? And she's absolutely. Caitlin just happens to be in that worship service that morning. And I talk about this idea that you and I reap what we sow. And God just so completely grips her heart. She's leaving she's going the next day to the doctor to get an abortion. And the Instagram message I get this week is a picture of her little boy named Mason. Cutest little baby. And I'm not telling you that because it was me. Can't we just agree? You and I can't explain that. Because human encounter and all of these things that happen in our life beg us to reckon with this reality that there is something bigger than us, greater than us. And Paul seems to imply this is the same mighty power that raised Christ from the dead. This power that holds your very existence in place, where nothing gets out of order. The fact that nobody has to wear a seatbelt while they're in a seat because we're going 67,000 miles an hour. Everything is in order. The fact that they can divide and divide and divide and divide and still can't figure out how we exist. And the only logical explanation is that we're spiritual. The fact that there is this moral reasoning in all of us that begs this reality that there is some sort of moral framework. The fact that human encounter and our experience screams at us that there's something bigger than us in existence. Paul implies that this is the same mighty power that raised Jesus from the dead, seated him in the place of honor of God, place of honor at God's right hand in the heavenly realms. Now he is far above any ruler or authority or power or leader or anything else. And I submit, you got to deal with that. Seniors, where are you? Seniors, look at me. It's okay for you to have an undecided or undeclared major. It's not okay for you to have an undeclared purpose. Middle school students, you know what seniors wish? They decided and figured out what their purpose was when they were in middle school. Young ladies in the room that keep bouncing from guy to guy and thing to thing and, selfie to selfie, Aflac, all those things that you do. There's something more. All the ballers in the room, all the athletes in the room. I was a college athlete 50 pounds ago, and here's what I can tell you. Now I can jump up in the air and get stuck. But here's the thing. All that's going to pass away. All that's going to go away. There's something bigger. To the guy who's sitting beside his girlfriend right now and you are holding hands so tight because you're scared he's going to run. All right. Just let him go. If he comes back, it was meant to be. It's like a bird. There's something more. And as we get ready to go to our small groups, if everything that I'm saying isn't true, heads up, get rid of it. Prove it away. Prove me wrong. If it isn't true, get rid of it. But watch this. If you can't get rid of it, it's true. And you got to deal with it. And can't we all just agree that if we can't get rid of it, and if it's true, why in the world would you build your life on anything else? Or maybe you're like an ancient city who begs, Paul, don't you dare stand in front of us and tell us about this one true God. Because we're comfortable with these puny gods who will never, ever satisfy us. Let me pray for us. Jesus, here's what I ask. Over the next couple of days, as we wrestle with you, I pray, God, that some of us will leave here with a limp. That we would reckon with your reality. That Paul's letter to the Ephesians would rattle us. That the resurrection would begin to change us. That an ancient letter would transform us. But more importantly, most importantly, that the reality of your existence would root us in our purpose. It would cause a change in us that sends shockwaves through our family, in our future, for generations to come in eternity. Because we decided this week, you are the one true God. There is nobody else like you. We have our life, our breath, our being because of you. You hold everything in place. There is nothing that has passed through your hands that you didn't want for us to experience, that you haven't allowed us to experience, that you haven't given us the ability to withstand because you want us to be like you. I pray that for that young lady who has been staring a hole at me in me all night because she knows she lives like a practical atheist. For the guy who's the same, who can't even look because he knows his life isn't rooted in you. For the middle school guy and girl who has a chance, unlike all of us in this room who are older, to start right, to build their life on the correct thing. And for every small group leader, adult in this room, how many times we have walked down the street of Ephesus and looked at the puny gods and decided, Paul, I don't want you to say anything. Would you move and change us this week?